morning, brothers and sisters.
Good morning.
Friends, loved ones. Great to be back. Sunday school time. I thought for our Sunday school we'd take a look at a very important part of ancient Israeli history, that being the transition from the time period of the judges to King Saul, the relationship between Samuel, the importance of Samuel, the transition to kingship under Saul, and then we'll take a look at Saul and David, that interaction, the relationship that they had, and kind of the growth of Israel as a power in the Middle East under David. And that should probably take us, end of October, somewhere around there. I think I have enough information, but we'll check. Maybe I'll have to throw in a movie or something. An old teacher trick.
Field trip.
All right, so let's get into it. What I like to do with this, anyways, is let's paint a picture, right, of the time period that we're talking about. Let's try to visualize the time period and the people that are involved in this, right? Oftentimes we read the Bible and the Philistines. We tend to look at different cities, but it's always good to know where these places are in relationship to Israel. Okay? So here is a very, I wouldn't say crude map, but it's a very simple map here for the Philistines right here are on the coastline. Okay, so that's an important important piece of information to understand. The Philistines are on the coast of what is modern day Israel, and so let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at Joshua in the 13th chapter of Joshua. Now we know the story. The children of Israel come into the land. They're given the land. They have numerous battles. They subdue the land. But was all the land subdued? It was not. That is going to become a major problem in the land of Israel. For whatever reason, for a lot of different reasons, the land was not cleared of the other inhabitants. And so from the time of Joshua all the way up until the time of David and Solomon, there's going to be this intermingling of the Canaanites, the Philistines, Moabites, right? Between all of these people. I have another map we'll take a look at. But let's look at Joshua, the 13th chapter. We're told in the first verse that Joshua is old and stricken in years. He's old. He's going to die. But the land had not been cleared of people. And so let's look at verse 2. This is the land that yet remaineth. The land that remained that had not been cleared. All the borders of the Philistines. Okay? So all of this land right here along the Mediterranean coast, the Philistine people, Israel didn't clear it out for whatever reason. They weren't strong enough. The Philistines actually were a very powerful group of people. We'll get into that in a second. They had iron weapons. They had blacksmiths that knew how to work in iron material. And that was something that the children of Israel were just learning about. Their weapons primarily, anyone know the metal that was used before iron?
Bronze.
Excellent. Bronze was used before, right? Iron obviously is much stronger than bronze. You can do a lot more with it. So verse 3, from Sihor, which is before Egypt, even unto the border of Ekron, which is counted to the Canaanite, 5 lords of the Philistines. And they mention the cities, Gaza, Ashtaroth, Ashkelon, Gittites, and Ekron, okay? And so here they are right here. Ekron's right there, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath is right there as well. So we're talking about this area. So even in the time of Joshua, the Philistines were firmly ensconced in the land. And they were a powerful group of people. And so let's keep this in mind, and let's turn to Judges, the 13th chapter. Sorry. No problem. And now this is the beginning of the story of Samson, right? Samson is going to have a lot of interaction with the Philistines. Verse 1 of Judges 13. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. Okay, and so the Philistines, as is known here in these arrows, right, they're going to attack different strategic towns and strongholds in what is Judah and Israel right here. Does anyone know the geographic differences in this area right here? Anyone know?
Philistine is plains.
Okay, the plains, okay.
Israel is mountains.
All right, very good. Excellent. That's exactly correct. So, mostly on sea level right here, right? Along the coastline, flatter areas, the hills, or the mountains of Israel. We hear that term quite a bit, right? The mountains of Israel, all right in here. And so Israel was up in the mountains, and the Philistines were down in the plains. Now, this gave the Philistines access to what? To a couple things.
Seaports.
Okay, seaports, very good. So easy trading. They controlled really all of the trade along the coast of the Mediterranean. Israel and Judah, not so much, right? They're going to have to rely on the Philistines bringing things in. Now, up north, it was a little different story, but the Canaanites are going to control that area as well. So Israel really is going to be cut off from a lot of the trade. So that's one. Trade is a big one, right? It's going to be very difficult for the Israelites during this time to trade and to acquire wealth. What else is going to be the issue?
Travel?
Say again?
Travel. It's easier to travel on a flat ground than mountain range.
Okay, travel. That's excellent. Absolutely. I wasn't thinking about that, but that's a good one. Yeah, very good. Yes, Deb.
You can't grow crops in a mountaintop.
Oh, Deb, once again, you're 2 for 2, Deb. Excellent. Growing crops is going to be difficult in hilly, mountainous areas, okay? And so you're going to have the crop yield of the Israelites. Now, I'm getting a little historically nerdy here, and I apologize, but not really. The growing crops in here is going to be difficult, okay? You're not going to have the yields of crops that the Philistines are going to have on flat surfaces, and so they're going to control all of that area right there. And so the Philistines are going to get stronger through trade and through the fact that they had better land for cultivation. All right, and these are some of the little things. But you can see, here's one last thing. You can see all of the towns here in Israel, right? Israel and Judah. There's a lot of different towns. But the Philistines are going to expand. They have an expanding mentality. They were warlike. Does anyone ever hear the term the Sea Peoples? Anybody? Okay, the Sea Peoples are a group of people, very kind of mysterious, right? Kind of like the Vikings of the very ancient world. They're going to come down from north of Greece, and they're going to come flying down into the Mediterranean area and cause all kinds of havoc. Some of the great empires at this time are going to fall to the Sea Peoples. And in fact, Egypt almost was destroyed by the Sea Peoples. But the Egyptians kind of fought them back, and there's actually there's hieroglyphics of this great battle that Ramses III fought against the Sea Peoples. The Philistines were part of the Sea Peoples, so they're actually going to be invaders into the land of Israel. And so this is going to be one of the things that, you know, is going to cause a lot of contention, right, between Israel, who was here. I mean, I guess they were invaders as well, but it was promised by God. The Philistines are going to come and take over the coastline. Israel is not going to have the strength and the power to do anything about it. They're going to establish themselves up in the mountains. But the Philistines, because of their trade, because of their cultivation of crops and goods, and then number 3, their ability to make Iron Age weapons, swords, spears, that type of thing, they are going to control this area, and they're going to be... What was the relationship with the Philistines and Israel? Not great. Right? It's particularly from an Israel point of view, they were pretty brutal to the Israelites, right? They attacked them, they took all of their goods, that type of thing. We'll get into this, but in Samuel it talks about the Philistines sending raiders out into the city, out into the towns of Judah and taking all of their goods and stuff like that, right? And this is when Jonathan and his armor bearer are going to go up into the garrison, they're going to climb up. We'll get into that later on. So this is kind of the setting of Samuel, the story of Samuel and Saul. The Philistines were a major problem. They were lords over Israel. And, you know, whenever you have one group of people lording over another group of people, that inequality creates bitterness. It creates anger. It creates frustration. Does that frustration and that anger come out in Judges with under Samson? Sure it does, right? Samson was he was very angry at the Philistines. But it's interesting too that the Philistines and the Israelites did trade with each other. They had interactions, right? In fact, what did Samson do when he saw the Philistine girl? What did he tell his parents?
Want her.
I want her. Get her for me,
That's right.
Get her right now. And so, so that was, and that wasn't just Samson, right? You obviously know if Samson was doing it, other people were doing it as well. So, anyways, all right. One last map to take a look at here. Yes. So this one kind of shows a little bit more about, this is Israel in the days of King Saul. Okay. Here is Israel right here, okay? These are all of the different tribes, a very loose confederation, right? It was, before Saul, there obviously wasn't a king. They had a shared culture and a shared religion for the most part. Here is Jordan right here. You had, Jabesh, Gilead, Raymond, but you had Ammon here, you had Edom, and you had Moab. So on the right here on the eastern side of Jordan, they are surrounded by these three people, right? These three countries that were not friendly to Israel. Down here, the Amalekites, pretty good guys, right? Got along with everybody. The Amalekites, no, they were vicious. So they're down in the south, okay? And then the Philistines are right here along the coast, as we talked about, and then assorted Canaanite tribes along the coast, and also up here in the Phoenicians. So Israel, when we look at Judges and when we look at 1 Samuel, it's good to understand this, that Israel really was landlocked, and they're being squeezed from both sides by their enemies. And we know this from Judges, don't we? Because, we have, 20, 30 years of a judge coming and kind of organizing things and providing good leadership, turning the people back to God, working together as a group of people. Then he dies, they do evil again. They're out for their own self-interest, they don't care about God, they're worshiping other gods, they're doing their own thing, they don't care about their fellow Hebrew. And so this is really the outcome. At the time of Saul, they were in a desperate strait, weren't they? This is not a good situation from an economic situation, but also a political situation. It's a very difficult problem. The Philistines are slowly moving eastward into the land of Israel. And that's recorded for us. That's recorded for us in Judges. It's also recorded for us in 1 Samuel as well. This was a very difficult time for the children of Israel. And so this is the time period that we're going to look at. Okay? And so when we're talking about the Philistines, highly organized. They worked together, the five lords. They were kind of like little city-states, I guess, for a good political term. They were city-states. They did their own thing, but they were also allied together with each other for a common goal of expanding their territory. And the weakest of all of these people at that time, unfortunately, was Israel. Okay? Questions, comments before we go on? Get the picture? Absolutely, yes.
Just like
Um,
today, they're
just-
squeezed by all their enemies.
That's a great connection, right? And if, Psalm 83 kind of talks about that, doesn't it? About being surrounded by their enemies. And the same thing is happening today. Now, Israel's a little bit stronger today, and they're very politically astute, and they make a lot of good decisions politically to keep themselves viable, but absolutely, they are surrounded still by their enemies. The good thing about Israel now is, do they control the coastline? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. Don't forget about the Phoenicians up here as well. Okay, the Phoenicians were a great trader and a great power as well. And in fact, Israel's going to have good relationships with the Phoenicians for a long period of time. They're going to help. They're going to help who build the temple? This is a softball, please. Right? They're gonna help Solomon build the temple, right? In fact, they're going to work with David to gather all of the materials as well and provide all of the materials, particularly the cedar trees from the cedar forest up in what's modern day Lebanon. Okay? All right. So let's take a look at this. All right, this is kind of, some general stuff. Era of Judges was a mixed bag, wasn't it? Good times under leadership of a godly leader. God's work is done. There's no consistency in leadership. Once this leader goes, they go back to doing whatever they want. The Philistines were increasing in power, particularly in the south, and this is becoming a major problem. God's people are going to beg to have a king like everybody else. God finally agreed, and Samuel is going to be the one that's going to anoint Saul. We'll get into that in a little bit, as the king. Okay, and we know the story. We'll look at it in a little more detail, right? You're not rejecting Samuel. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me, right? And then this is going to be a time period in Israelites' history where there's going to be political power, but also religious power that is going to be shared. With Saul, it was Samuel. Who was the prophet during David's time?
Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan the prophet. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so each one of these kings is going to have a seer or kind of a religious guru that a king is going to go to for direction. Some of them are mentioned in Scripture. Some of them are not. Sometimes the king is going to listen and have a great relationship with the prophet. Other times, not so much, right? The king is going to turn on them and kill some of these prophets as well. One that kind of sticks in my mind now, Ahab and Elijah, right? Because there's sometimes where Elijah Ahab listens to Elijah, and then Jezebel gets involved, and it's like, no, we're gonna kill this guy. Okay? All right, moving on. Okay, there's 3 here. Okay, so we have a tremendous amount of history in 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. 1st and 2nd Samuel has 3 main characters: Samuel, Saul, and David. Are there minor characters mentioned in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel? Of course there are, but these are the 3 main guys. 1st and Kings deals with other kings, beginning with David and Solomon. I think we all know this. 1st and 2nd Chronicles is going to be written later on in the history, most likely during the exile in Babylon, by, some people say, Ezra, or another unnamed scribe. And he's going to write down this history to preserve, the history of the people. Because remember, they're in this foreign land in Babylon. They have they're being pressured now, not only, but culturally they're being pressured to kind of forget about the land, forget about your past. You're a Babylonian now. And so the scribes are like, whoa, wait a minute. We got to copy these sacred scriptures down. We have to keep this history going. And so that was really the purpose of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. The scribe, though, God, through the scribe, had a theological viewpoint from this. And this is really kind of the tension in 1st and 2nd Chronicles between idolatry and the worship of God. And if you look at 1st and 2nd Chronicles, that's really the struggle. And also Jeroboam, right? Jeroboam, who made Israel to sin by setting up his own religious rituals, his own temples, that type of thing. Setting up the golden calf, right? These are your gods, O Israel. How many times is that mentioned in 1st and 2nd Chronicles? A lot, right? And so that's one of the things, all right? David's weaknesses in 1st and 2nd Chronicles really aren't mentioned too much. Is David and Bathsheba mentioned in Chronicles? It's not. No. So it is mentioned in Samuel, though. Okay, so you're getting a different perspective. I look at this a lot of ways, kind of like the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each one of the Gospels has, they're not word for word. Some things that are in Luke are not mentioned in John, and vice versa, right? And so they're different viewpoints. And then, God wants us to look at things from different viewpoints. But the underlying truth is always there. And so I think there's a lot of beauty in that. There's a lot of beauty in that. All right. 3. First and Second Samuel. First and Second Samuel is considered to be a masterpiece, okay, of a literary masterpiece of a story, right? Telling a story. And the next time we read this, just look at the way kind of it's written. It really is. It's fascinating, right? It has all of the great kind of things that human beings love. This tension. We have good guys and bad guys. David and Goliath, right? You have this relationship between Saul and David. Saul loves David, but then he turns on him, right? Saul is slain his thousands, David his 10,000s. Right? Saul gives David his daughter to marry, right? So it becomes a family feud. The civil war between David and the sons of Saul. Mephibosheth running when they heard that the Philistines had beaten Israel on Mount Gilboa, right? He's running, the nurse is running with Mephibosheth, drops him, he's paralyzed. Wow, all kinds of stuff is happening, right? There's actually David, I think there's been a couple movies. Richard Gere played David in one that's like in the 1980s, years and years ago. It really is just one book, okay? It is divided now, but it is really just one book. It's Samuel, right? And again, it deals with Samuel, Saul, and David in the relationship between these three. Samuel and David, David is going to have a relationship with Samuel that's very close, very early on, but as we know, Samuel is going to die, and I think that's going to be a blow to David as far as direction is concerned. He's going to lose a father figure, and I think David is going to feel isolated and alone during this time. He's already dealing with, Saul trying to attack him. He's got to, David's got to deal with the Philistines as well. And when we get into it, we're going to see some of the interesting ways that David kind of balances all of these different peoples, right, together to try to maneuver his way to the top. And he did, right? Any questions on this? Comments? All right. This is a very, yes, okay. This is just a very general overview of what we're going to be taking a look at in a little more detail. 1 Samuel 1 through 8 is the calling of Samuel. Okay, Samuel is going to be called to be a prophet. Okay, we'll look at that. We'll probably get into that story a little bit today. The establishment of the monarchy under Saul. Saul was anointed king. It was going to be Saul and his family that were going to be the ruling family of Israel. But it didn't. We know it didn't work out because Saul is going to make some mistakes. Saul is going to become king. There is a very difficult relationship between Samuel and Saul. But we're told that Samuel actually did love Saul, right? And God kind of had to, I guess, chide Samuel a little bit because he says, how long are you going to mourn for Saul? Let's go. We got to move on. The time of mourning is over. So Samuel, I think, generally had love and affection for Saul, and I think Samuel saw the incredible potential that Saul had. He really, Saul could have been one of the great kings, but he had a lot of, I think, internal struggle that we're going to look at in his mind. David is going to enter the picture in 1 Samuel 16 through 24. Death of Samuel, continued tension between Saul and David, and then in 1 Samuel 31, the death of Saul. Okay? So there is a lot going on. And then continuing on, boom. David is going to fend off challenges from Saul's sons. Ishbosheth, there's going to be a civil war. I think it says, I think the wording in the King James is that David's house grew stronger and stronger. Saul's house grew weaker and weaker. All right, we'll take a look at that. David is going to rule Israel unchallenged. He is going to be the undisputed leader of Israel. First in Hebron for 7 years, and then he's going to move to Jerusalem. He's going to take Jerusalem, the stronghold of Jabesh, of the Jebusites, and he's going to rule for 40 years and really stabilize this area. And what is he going to do to the Philistines? He's going to wipe them out, isn't he? The Philistines, after David, you don't really hear from the Philistines anymore. They're going to be wiped out. And then, you know, in the 2 Samuel, the end of David's reign and his story. Okay? That's what we're going to cover. Just a little bit of history, no big deal. Don't worry about it. All right.
Were those the cliff notes?
Those are the notes. That's right. I'll know. You know, we have a thing at school that it's called a Dropbox, so they have to put it in, and we have a software that goes through the paper, and it tells you, it marks in red everything that's been plagiarized. So you know, you get these is like 85%. Your paper is 85% plagiarized. So what I tell them is, I go, look, before you give it to me, run it through the program, see where the issues are, and then give it back to me. But yeah, it's so you get, you know, it's not, they think they can get away with it all the time. I changed the direction of the words, and no, it's plagiarism. All right, so let's take a look at 1 Samuel 1. So before we look at this, you know, there is a theme in the Old Testament, beginning with Sarah, right? About, you know, women desperately having to have children, right? Sarah was old. Eventually, she's going to have Isaac. It's going to be a great blessing. You know, she laughed. Remember the angels came, and the angels are telling Abraham, yeah, you know, Sarah's going to have a kid in a year, and she's like, she laughs. And then she denied she laughed. And there was like this argument between the angels and Sarah about laughing. It's great. So Isaac, remember Rebecca as well was barren for a period of time, right? But Esau and Jacob come from that, right? Jacob, and I forgot to put this on it, I'm just remembering now, but Jacob and Rachel, right? Rachel, you remember what Rachel said to Jacob? Because Leah is having like 1,700 kids, right? And she's not having any kids. Remember? There's like this incredible frustration on Rachel's part. Give me children or I'll die, she says, right? And Jacob's like, who am I, God? I can't do anything about it. And so eventually she does have, you know, both Joseph and Benjamin. Unfortunately, she dies in childbirth with Benjamin. Anyways. Samson as well. If we look, we don't have to turn it up. And then in Judges, Samson's mother was barren, and the angel came again and told him that she was going to have a child. He was going to be a Nazarite. Remember, wasn't going to cut his hair. He's take the Nazarite vow, and he was going to. It was going to be the beginning of Israel fighting off the Philistines. So the beginning of this kind of great conflict began with Samson. All right, and it's going to end with David. And it's really about, I don't know, a period of 60 or 70 years where there's going to be a tremendous battles. And Israel isn't going to come out on top for a while. It's going to be a very long, drawn-out battle. We're going to take a look at that. All right, let's take a look then in 1 Samuel, the first chapter. We're introduced to Samuel. We're actually not introduced to Samuel. We're actually introduced to Elkanah and his wife Hannah, right? We're also introduced to this very interesting character, Eli. Eli was the high priest, and his family was in charge of the rituals and the routines of the tabernacle, as it was stated in the law of Moses. Anyone know where the tabernacle was located at this time?
Shiloh?
Who said Shiloh? Jim, thank you. It's always the smart kids that try to hang out in the back. I'm going to move you up front with your friends. You know, so we have, you know, we have another interesting thing. You know, Elkanah in verse 2, Peninnah and Hannah are his two wives, right? So once again, we have this tension. So 1 Samuel starts straight away with tension, family tension, right? Two wives. They don't like each other. Peninnah despises Hannah. Hannah is just, she's desperate for a child, right? What does it say here? And So, Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children, verse 2, right? Verse 4, Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters portions. So she has numerous children. And Elkanah is passing along the inheritance, the wealth of the family to these children, okay? And Hannah's like, what's going to happen to me? I don't have any children. What's going to happen? Verse 5, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion. Oh, okay, so Elkanah, loves his wife, giving a portion. For he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. Verse 6, and her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. Oof. Right? That's a tough life to live, isn't it? Right? Particularly when your self-worth as a woman in the ancient world was tied up in childbirth, right? And passing and having children and being a mother of Israel. And you're denied that. And that would have just been a constant source of sadness and of grief. And then to have, your wife, the other wife constantly berating her, you're worthless, you're nothing. And that's exactly what was going on. And so this is how 1 Samuel starts, doesn't it? Let's see. Now Eli the priest in verse 9. So Hannah rose up after they had eaten Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by the post of the temple of the Lord. We know that he sat because he was a big guy, okay? And it's actually going to be his downfall, right? Because when he hears the news of the loss of the Ark of the Covenant, he's going to tip his seat over and he's going to die. He's 90 years old. But anyways. Verse 10, and she was in bitterness of soul. We ever just read that? I think sometimes we just read words and they just don't really. Bitterness of soul. Well, that's a powerful, powerful collection of words. To be in bitterness in your soul. I think we've all been there, tragedy, sadness in our lives, difficult situations. Hannah was in a very difficult situation, and she was in bitterness of her soul. And prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. Get the picture there, right? She prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. Bitterness of soul, weeping, right? But she was praying. And so there's a lesson there, brothers and sisters, isn't there? Despite the mental anguish that she was in, she still had the wherewithal to turn to God in prayer. She still recognized God as her Savior and her hope and knew that she could be delivered of this by God. And I think we, in our lives, whatever situation we go through, if we're, struggling mentally, spiritually, physically, and everybody in this room is struggling with something. I know you are. I think the lesson from Hannah is a powerful one. We have to turn to God in prayer and give it to God. That's what Hannah was doing, right? She was asking God for help, giving her problem to God. And we should do the same in our lives, shouldn't we? And so it came to, and so verse 11, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord in all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. Okay, and so she's asking God. I've got a good sweat going up here. She's asking God to give her a child, and she's doing this. She's praying, right? And her lips are moving like this. And Eli looks over, and Eli's like, Eli gets all upset. Eli thinks that she's drunk. And Hannah's like, I'm not drunk. I'm praying to God. right? So Eli made a mistake. He prejudged the situation. Here was this woman in the depths of despair, praying as hard as she can to God, and she's being flayed for it. You know, so poor Hannah, right? She's going there to be relieved of this, praying to God. Her home life is awful. She's being persecuted by Peninnah every single day because she has no children. She goes into the tabernacle. She's praying to God, and now you got the high priest giving her the business. She can't win. But Hannah's, verse 14. How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. I think Hannah's response is wonderful, right? She isn't indignant. Now, granted, there was a different relationship between a high priest and a woman in the ancient world, but still, it's a very respectful response, even though she was being falsely accused. No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul unto the Lord. That is a beautiful literary device right there, right? I'm not drunk, I'm pouring out my soul to the Lord. That's wonderful. And so she's commended by Eli for this, right? And it's, go in peace, verse 17, the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. So she's granted her petition. God gives her Samuel. And I want, when you have a chance, in chapter 2, take a look at Hannah's prayer and compare it to Mary's prayer. There's some striking similarities between the two. And they're two beautiful prayers, right? Mary's going to say this prayer after, the angel Gabriel comes, right, and says you're going to be, the Holy Spirit will come and, should name Christ, and he's be the Savior of Israel and the world. My heart rejoices in the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord, my mouth is enlarged over my enemies because I rejoice in thy salvation. Talk no more so exceedingly proudly. She's talking about Peninnah here, right? Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumble are girded with strength. They that were full have hired out themselves for bread, and they that were hungry cease, so that the barren have borne 7, and she that hath many children are waxed feeble. Verse 7, the Lord maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. He raises up the poor. So Hannah she's taking the events of her life and she's flipping them. She's telling everyone of the wonderful things. Hannah was so low, and God has raised her up. Right? And the great and the powerful people have been brought low. And if you look at what Mary says essentially the same thing in Luke chapter 1. And we won't get into it, but take a look at it. It's beautiful. And Hannah is true to her word. What does she do with Samuel?
Takes him to Eli.
That's right. Takes him to Eli, and he is going to grow up in and around Eli and his sons and his family and the rituals of the temple of the tabernacle at that time. Was that a good environment? What do you think? Was that a good environment?
Compared to the alternative.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Extremely structured.
It was structured. Okay. Yes, he's going to certainly learn about God and learn about the tabernacle and the rituals and all of that. He's going to learn about the law.
Yeah, but Eli's sons were taking over and doing things that were ungodly.
That's right.
God
Yeah.
didn't want them to do.
Yeah. So that's great, Mark. So I guess that's what I'm looking at is, yes, on the one hand, it was a great environment. I think Eli is going to be a wonderful teacher and a wonderful father figure. But Samuel is also going to see the corruption of Eli's sons, and just really the evil that was going on and the injustice that they're going to promulgate on the children. They're going to take all the children of Israel. They're going to take all the good stuff. They're going to be sleeping with the women. It's just a bad situation. Let's in chapter 2 of Samuel. Chapter 2 of Samuel. Whew. Thank you, Jim. We're almost done here. So it says that, it got so bad in verse 12 of the second chapter of Samuel. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial, worthless men. They didn't know God, the Bible says. They didn't know God. They were, and so that's interesting, isn't it? They're going through all the rituals, right? All the sacrifices. They were going through the motions. They looked righteous, weren't righteous at all. Didn't even know God. Knew nothing about Him, right? And so they were stealing all of the best parts of the animal for themselves. Okay? They were taking whatever they wanted. And it got so bad that the children of Israel, it tells us in verse 17, wherefore the sin of the young men were very great before the Lord, for men abhorred, they hated the offering of the Lord. It got so bad that the children of Israel hated going to the tabernacle and offering sacrifices, because it was so abhorrent to them what Eli's sons were doing. Okay, and it goes on in verse 22. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, Why do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress. And we know that they didn't listen. They continued to do this. And this, and so Eli is, he's old, right? And so somewhere along the way, and it's hard to, you don't want to blame parents for their sons, but obviously God did hold Eli responsible for what was going on with his sons on some level. He did, because he's going to take the priesthood away from Eli and from his family because of the wickedness of his sons. Okay? Let's end here for now. Are there any questions on anything that we went through? Deb.
It might have been a pretty good thing for Samuel as a boy to be in that priesthood, because if Peninnah was that abusive to Hannah, her and her kids are just going to wail on poor Samuel, so he had to get him out of that environment.
I would tend to agree, Deb. Yeah. I think they were certainly mental abuse, right? And maybe even some physical abuse, right? We know that Hannah is going to be blessed with other children, but that probably wasn't the best environment. And so he's going to be brought to the tabernacle. Eli is going to teach him the law. And I think on some level, maybe Eli was trying to redeem himself. He says, look, I've messed up with my own biological kids. Maybe I can do something with Samuel. I'll do right this time, right? And it seems that Eli and Samuel had a very close relationship, and Eli did teach him the ways of God.